Hi, and thank you for joining me for another video. Friends, today we're going to cover Parashat Vayechi. And we see that this portion is really the ethical culmination of pretty much everything we've read so far, and so it should be. I mean, it's the last Parsha in Bereshit, right? So this Parsha actually places us on top of the mountain, looking down, trying to piece together God's overall message. But we still have to ask ourselves, in retrospect, are these just the chronicles of a nomadic people? And if not, what is it trying to tell us? What can we learn from this, friends? Anyways, we can sense in this Parsha that Yaakov Avinu is asking the same question and coming up with just one answer. And what's that? Friends, that historical, cultural norms suck, which is why we see that the Almighty's will is never affected by them. Yaakov Avinu must have thought, from his grandfather Abraham to the deathbed he was lying in, that everything that happened was not supposed to happen, at least not naturally, at least not without a fight. Now, what do I mean by this? Friends, the people of Israel were not supposed to exist if left up to nature. We know that Avram and Sarah were not able to have children. We know that Yitzchak was the second and not the firstborn. We know that Rivka was initially barren, and that Yaakov, apart from being the second-born, was less impressive than his brother Esau and had to fight with the angel even to be known as Israel. He knew that everything he had, he fought for. Why? Because it wasn't meant to be. Telling us that when we're walking in the ways of God, every challenge, every trial becomes an opportunity to make God real in someone else's life. Just like our father Yaakov is doing for us right here in this Parsha. Teaching all of us the great eternal lesson that when you trust in God, He will ensure your survival and He will ensure your success, my friends. So don't give up. We then see that after all his son Yosef has been through, he has not completely learned this lesson, because he insists that age should override ethics by insisting that Yaakov should bless his eldest son. But not in Yaakov's book, my friends. Honestly, how many times have you seen someone in a position they didn't deserve? Whether it be jerks born with money while good men struggle, or even ungrateful people born into prestigious Jewish families, while many grateful ones out there have to fight for a conversion. Yes, friends, this is a trap that many of us fall into or have in the past. But Yaakov Avinu knew better than to let his morality be decided for him. And again, my friends, this is what makes these men great, because they transcend you and I. In other words, their ways are not our ways. They emulate something greater. In this case, it was Yaakov Avinu emulating Avram Avinu, who emulated God. And we even see this here when he speaks one last time over his descendants, not bashing them for what they are, but giving them tochacha, so that they could be inspired to reach what they could become, to the point that Scripture even calls these statements blessings. However, we must ask, why does this appear in Scripture? Do the tribes that these brothers later represent embody any of these traits? For example, it states that Levi is a violent, killing man. However, we see later in Scripture that Shevet Levi became the most distinguished of the tribes, right? No, friends, the purpose for this is to teach us that everything we do on earth ultimately means nothing if we can't transfer to a future generation. Why? Because, friends, this isn't Buddhism, this is Judaism. Perhaps we don't have expectations, but we have desires, which is nothing less than elevating this world to an age of peace, a task that is clearly a team effort, truly not limited to one generation. And might I add, the only reason for becoming or remaining Jewish. And how do we know that this is the way? Well, because this is the same reason the Almighty chose and appointed Abraham, as it states, "For I have chosen him so that he will direct his children and his household after him to keep the way of the Lord by doing what is right and just." And this task is what we see Yaakov Avinu trying to secure in this parsha by speaking to his children. Now, again, we have to understand that Yaakov Avinu is not trying to tie their fate to his words, but rather judging them according to their character and integrity, so that they could improve, maintain, and encourage their beliefs on others, which lays down another principle in Scripture, that all curses are warnings, my friends, and all blessings are conditional promises. And Scripture alludes to this point in how the brothers reacted in hearing their father's words, right? I mean, Reuben didn't grovel at hearing his portion, nor did Yehuda boast after hearing his, which is actually the sin that Joseph committed when he was given a dream from the Almighty, right? It said that he boasted. So in other words, he didn't use the opportunity to improve himself and encourage those around him. And friends, I have to ask you today, is there an area in your life that you feel that God has been gracious, or that you may have even fought to achieve what you have, that you are not using to encourage others around you? Whether it's inviting someone for a Shabbos meal, or even sharing the religion you may have been lucky enough to be born into with others. And this, my friends, alludes to the principle I mentioned in last week's Parashat Vayechi, that although failing to reach our full potential and walking before the Lord may be permissible, for sure, my friends, it's not beneficial. Which is why we see in this week's Parsha that Yaakov is not only chastising his sons, but rather inspiring them to reach higher and understand where they stand in the scheme of things, so they could do the same for others and emulate our father Abraham, who used everything around him to encourage everyone to love the Almighty and ultimately change, my friends, to the point that the Rambam even teaches that the way we fulfill the mitzvah of loving the Creator is by making him loved by everyone else, like our father Abraham did, which is why Chazal state that the age of Torah began with Abraham. However, we have to ask, why not Noah? Friends, because although Noah did enough, he did not strive for more, which is the goal of life. Not only to be a good student, but to strive to ultimately become a teacher. No, friends, it was our father Abraham who not only improved and maintained, but encouraged his walk with God on others, which is why I constantly bash this Noahide movement of today. Because, friends, any group that does not encourage greatness from its adherents, but rather tells their followers to do less, or worse, to do the bare minimum, is lost itself and does not derive from a holy source, which is why the Midrash teaches us in last week's Parsha that Yosef would not distribute food unless the Egyptians first agreed to be circumcised themselves. Why? Because walking with God means nothing if you're walking alone. And something else that usually comes up when we learn this Parsha is the concept of blessing someone, and what does it accomplish, right? Like we just read that Yaakov blessed his sons. Friends, the act of blessing someone does not affect anything in someone else's life outside that person's power to change. And no one knew this better than Yaakov Avinu, who, although purchasing a birthright, tricking his father into blessing him and wresting a blessing from an angel, did not get anything for free in his life, but fought for everything. So the next time, friends, you see someone lining up for a bracha, tell them to ask for advice instead. And if you're interested in learning more about Torah Judaism, I want you to visit bejewish.org. And if you're interested in converting to Judaism, please visit torahjudaism.org. Thank you.